The abused donkey. Stories that change your life. From hurt to strength. You've heard of stories that break hearts. But what about the ones that stitch them back together? In today's episode, we follow Tobias, a humble donkey, through a journey that is far more than survival. It is transformation, taken from safety and thrown into despair. Tobias learns that real captivity begins not with chains, but with the fear inside our minds. As you listen, you may begin to recognize parts of your own story within his. Moments where you froze at the edge of freedom, hesitated under invisible weight, or kept walking because a quiet voice told you not to stop. This is not just a tale about pain. It is about reclaiming voice, rediscovering strength, and learning to see others, especially those who hurt us, as once broken too. Stay with us, because sometimes what saves you isn't a rescue. It's the moment you believe you are worth saving. Silent night. An unexpected upheaval strikes. Beneath a sky littered with stars, the night stretched out in perfect silence. In a small open field, a donkey named Tobias grazed peacefully, his breath slow and steady. His owner, a man aged by the weight of years, rested in a hut nearby, trusting the stillness of the night to guard them both. It was the kind of quiet that makes the world feel safe, as if nothing could ever disturb it. But safety, as Tobias would learn, is often just the illusion before the fall. From the shadows came a soft creak, so faint it barely touched the air. Tobias lifted his head. His ears twitched. Something was not right. A figure stepped forward, emerging from the dark like a nightmare made real. The man's face was half hidden, but the cruelty in his movement was clear. Before Tobias could flee or even bray for help, a coarse muzzle was forced onto his face, silencing him in an instant. His body jolted in resistance, but he was yanked forward, torn from the earth he knew from the night he thought would protect him. Each step taken was a step away from everything familiar. His eyes searched for his owner, but no one came. The hut remained still, as if nothing had happened. The stars above shimmered coldly, witnessing, but unmoved. In his chest, panic gave way to something heavier, a quiet kind of grief, not for where he was going, but for the place he could no longer return to. That night, Tobias did not just lose his freedom. He lost something more fragile, the belief that peace once found would last. The edge of despair. A place of torment with no way out. Tobias was dragged for what felt like hours through dry soil and thorny undergrowth until the ground beneath him changed. The grass disappeared, replaced by cracked earth and a suffocating stillness that made the air feel heavier. This was no ordinary place. It was barren and lifeless, yet strangely alive with the quiet suffering of those who had come before him. As he was led through a broken gate, Tobias saw them. Donkeys thin as shadows moved in slow circles around large grinding stones. Their eyes were empty, their bodies barely held together by skin and memory. No one spoke, no one rested. This was a place where pain was routine and hope had long been stripped away. The ones in control were not farmers, but cruel men, hardened and greedy. They did not use words, only whips, and the sound of each lash cracked through the silence like thunder. Food came in small amounts, water even less, just enough to keep the body from collapsing completely. Tobias, still full of instinct and resistance, tried to escape more than once. But every attempt was punished without mercy. Each beating did not just leave bruises on his body, it carved doubt into his spirit. With each passing day, his steps grew slower, his gaze more distant. He was becoming like the others, not just tired but hollowed out. Something inside him whispered that this was all life would ever be. And yet there was still something in him that resisted vanishing completely. A flicker, quiet and unnoticed but still burning. A part that had not yet forgotten what it felt like to be free. Desperate escape, met only with deeper hopelessness. Tobias could not accept this life, not yet. Though his body weakened, a quiet refusal grew inside him. Late one night, when the sky was overcast and most of the guards were asleep, he tried again. He waited until the footsteps faded and the millstone slowed. With all the strength he had left, he broke into a sprint. His hooves struck the ground with urgency, his breath sharp with fear. For a moment, the world opened wide and real freedom seemed close, but it lasted only seconds. The men were faster than he expected. They saw him, shouted, and ran. Tobias felt the thud of boots behind him, then the sting of the first lash across his back. He fell. He tried to rise, but pain and exhaustion pinned him down. They beat him with such fury that even the others turned away. When it was over, Tobias lay motionless, his sides heaving. No words were spoken. No one came to help. The night swallowed his cries as if they were nothing. After that, something inside him broke. He no longer looked for a way out. He moved when ordered, ate when given food, drank without complaint. On the outside, he looked like all the others. But inside, a slow erosion had begun. He started to believe what they wanted him to believe, that he was just an animal meant for burden, that this was all he could ever be. But the truth was more complex. Tobias was not weak, he was tired. And tiredness is not the same as surrender. Still, that line grew thinner each day. In the absence of kindness, even the strongest can lose sight of who they are. He did not yet know it, but what he needed was not just escape. He needed someone to remind him he still mattered. A door opens, but fear holds you back. One morning, after a heavy rainstorm had passed, something unexpected happened. The gate to the compound had been damaged and left ajar. The men were busy arguing about how to repair it and had not yet noticed that the lock no longer held. Tobias, now thinner and weaker, lay nearby, his chain loose around his ankle. He lifted his head slightly and saw the opening. A small gap, maybe no more than a few steps wide, but wide enough to change everything. His heart pounded. The old instinct stirred. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was real, and it was right there. But so was fear. Tobias remembered the last time he ran, the beating. The shame, the way he was dragged back and left broken. His body twitched but did not move. Inside him, a war raged between possibility and pain. He took one step, then stopped. What if they caught him again? What if it was worse this time? What if he deserved to be here after all? He looked at the others. No one moved. Their eyes, once full of spirit, were now dull. They had stopped trying long ago. Tobias felt the pull of their silence. Giving up had become normal, resisting abnormal, and yet the gap remained. The chance had not disappeared. His breath quickened, legs trembling, but the fear still rooted him in place. It was not the gate that held him captive anymore. It was the fear of what might happen if he hoped again. Pain had taught him that expecting more only led to disappointment. So he turned away, retreating from freedom, not because he could not reach it, but because something inside him whispered it was safer not to try. When someone believes in you, even before you dare to believe in yourself. As Tobias stood frozen, torn between fear and the faint memory of freedom, a soft voice broke through the still air. It came from above, calm and steady, yet filled with something Tobias had not felt in a long time. Hope. A heron perched on a tree branch nearby, feathers white as snow, eyes sharp with quiet wisdom. The bird had been watching for days, seeing what Tobias himself could not. "What are you waiting for?" the heron called gently. "This is your chance. You cannot stay here and expect things to change." Tobias looked up, startled. No one had spoken to him with kindness in what felt like forever. He blinked, unsure if he had imagined it, but the bird continued, its voice unwavering. "I have seen how you hesitate. I know you are afraid, but freedom is not given. It is taken by those who remember they are more than what the world has told them to be." Tobias felt his chest tighten. Something about the heron's words struck deep. It was not just encouragement. It was belief, not an escape alone, but in who Tobias still was underneath all the hurt. That belief, small and unfamiliar, warmed something inside him. A part of him that had been silenced began to stir. He looked again at the open gate. It was still there. No one had moved. The path remained quiet and waiting. The heron flapped its wings once, then waited in stillness, not pushing, not forcing, only holding space for Tobias to choose. And for the first time in a long while, Tobias considered that maybe, just maybe, he still had a choice. Fleeing through the storm, when everything turns against you. With a trembling heart and legs that barely held, Tobias stepped forward. The chain slipped off without resistance. The gate stood open, the world beyond, it wide and unfamiliar. He took another step, then another. The heron flew above him, silent now, as if trusting Tobias to carry himself. For the first time in days, the wind felt real against his skin. The field stretched ahead like a forgotten promise. But freedom is rarely granted without a final test. The men noticed. Shouts rose behind him. Heavy boots hit the ground in pursuit. Tobias ran. His body weakened from days of hunger, and beating screamed with every stride. The sky darkened. Rain began to fall, first light, then pouring. Mud soaked the ground, turning every step into a struggle. The path blurred before his eyes. He stumbled over, rocks crashed into broken branches. Each fall scraped his legs, but he pushed forward. Behind him, the shouting grew closer. Tobias cried out, not in fear, but in despair. "I cannot do this." The words were not spoken aloud, but they rang inside his mind like thunder. "I am too tired. It is too late. Let them take me." The thought alone nearly stopped him. But above the storm, the heron circled its wings steady in the wind. "You are not alone, Tobias. Keep going." That voice returned, faint but firm. Not from the outside now, but from within. A memory, a whisper, a truth that refused to die. He gritted his teeth. The rain poured harder. His legs burned. But he did not stop, because even as everything around him pushed back, something deeper pushed forward. Not survival, something greater. A glimpse of the life he almost forgot he deserved. A voice from above. A glimmer of hope that never leaves your side. The rain fell harder, blurring the path ahead. Tobias stumbled again, mud clinging to his legs. vision clouded by water and exhaustion. Behind him, the shouts grew louder, closer, almost breathing down his neck. Every step felt like it might be the last. His strength was fading, his hope barely a flicker. The storm was not just outside now. It was within him, a storm of doubt, fear, and the growing urge to surrender. Then above the roar of the wind came the voice again. Not loud, not forceful, but clear enough to cut through everything. Keep going, Tobias. Do not stop now. You are almost there. The heron was flying just ahead, wings stretched wide, unwavering in the downpour. Its presence felt like a thread connecting Tobias to something greater than the pain. Not safety, not certainty, but purpose. Tobias raised his head. Through the curtain of rain, he saw something, a faint shape in the distance. A roof, a fence, the outline of shelter. He blinked, unsure if it was real or another illusion born of desperation. But the voice continued steady as the rain. Trust me, you are not running in circles. You are closer than you think. With that, something shifted, not in the world, but in Tobias. His legs still ached, the mud still pulled him down, but the despair loosened its grip. He was not alone. The voice above did not save him. It did not carry him. It simply stayed. And sometimes that is enough to keep someone moving, even when they have nothing left. Closer than you think. When the final light breaks through, Tobias pushed forward, breath-ragged legs trembling. The storm had not stopped, but something in him had. The part that used to doubt, the part that whispered it was useless, had fallen silent. Ahead, the shape of the shelter became clearer. A wooden gate, a sloped roof, a lantern flickering inside a hut. This was not a dream. It was real. The old farm, home. The men chasing him saw it too. They slowed. Perhaps they sensed that this place was different, sacred, protected. One of them shouted, but it no longer had weight. Tobias kept going. Each step hurt, but it was no longer pain that guided him. It was vision. The ability to see beyond the suffering, to remember that he was more than what had been done to him. He crossed the final stretch of muddy ground. His chest burned. His body was soaked, covered in scratches and bruises. But the gate was within reach. And then, as if the storm itself understood, the rain began to ease. The sky softened. For the first time, Tobias could see the land clearly. He stopped just before the entrance. Behind him, the men hesitated, then turned away, retreating into the fading storm. From the hut, his old owner ran out, arms wide, eyes filled with disbelief and tears. Tobias fell into his embrace. Not because he was weak, but because he had carried the weight alone for too long. Above them, the heron landed quietly nearby. It said nothing. It did not need to. In that silence, Tobias understood. He had not been saved by chance. He had saved himself. And what truly changed everything was not the distance he ran, but that he had chosen to run at all. From above the clouds. What you can't see when you're in despair. Later that evening, after Tobias had been cleaned and fed, he lay quietly beside the fire inside the hut. His body ached, but something deeper had begun to heal. The heron stood at the doorway, watching the flicker of light across the floor. Tobias turned his head toward it, eyes heavy but grateful. "Why did you believe in me?" he asked softly. "If you hadn't spoken, I would have given up. I was sure I had nothing left." The heron stepped closer, voice calm and clear. "Because when you are trapped inside a storm, you cannot see beyond it. But from above the clouds, I could see where you were headed. I knew the shelter was near. I knew the storm would not last. That is why I told you not to stop." Tobias listened, the words soaking into his tired heart. He had always thought strength was about never falling, never breaking. But now he saw it differently. Strength was moving even when you were shattered. It was trusting the voice that sees farther than you do. It was believing that darkness does not last forever, even if you cannot see the end yet. The heron looked at him once more. "You were never alone. You only felt that way because you could not see what I could. And someday you will be that voice for someone else." Tobias closed his eyes, not in sleep, but in understanding. He had walked through suffering and come out changed, not untouched, but awakened. And sometimes the ones who suffer the most become the ones who can guide others home. After the storm comes the moment to choose whether to go on. Days passed. The storm had cleared, but its memory remained. Tobias walked the fields near the hut, quieter now, more thoughtful. His wounds were healing, but not all of them were visible. Some were deeper, shaped by fear, betrayal, and the loneliness of pain endured in silence. He often paused, looking up at the sky, searching for the heron who had since flown on. He was safe now, yet something inside him still stirred a question he could not yet answer. One morning, as the sun rose and warmed the earth, Tobias stood at the edge of the field. He looked back at the path he had once taken, the mud, now dry, the tracks nearly gone. He could stay here in comfort and safety. No chains, no threats, no pain. But he also knew that healing was not just about safety. It was about what you choose after survival. Not just where you are, but who you become. He remembered the others still trapped, still moving in slow circles around those stones. They had no voice to guide them, no wings above to watch. They were not weak. They were forgotten. Tobias realized he had seen what many could not. And now he had something they did not. Perspective. A choice. The moment had come. Stay and rest, or return and lead. Not out of duty, but because he knew the road. He had walked through the fire and found his way back. And maybe, just maybe, his story was not only about escape, it was about return, about becoming the one who lights the path for those still trapped in the storm. Invisible chains, the ones you place on yourself. Long after the wounds had faded and the skies cleared, Tobias still felt a strange heaviness inside him. No one was chasing him now. No ropes held him. Yet some mornings he would wake and still expect to hear the crack of a whip or the bark of a command. Even in safety, fear lingered. It was not the fear of others anymore. It was the fear he had learned to carry within. He began to notice how he hesitated before walking too far from the hut, how he doubted his choices even when there was no threat. The freedom he had longed for was now his, yet something within held him back. Slowly, Tobias realized the chains had not just been around his body, they had sunk into his thoughts, into the way he saw himself. He had started to believe the lies told to him in captivity, that he was weak, that he was less, that safety meant staying small. And this, he discovered, was the hardest prison to escape. Not one made of walls or fences, but of old beliefs and silent shame. The voice that had once told him to run was still there, but it was quieter now, drowned by the doubts that had grown roots in his silence. Tobias knew he needed to do more than walk away from the past. He had to confront what it had planted inside him. So each day he chose to walk a little farther, to stand a little taller, to trust a little more, not because he was sure, but because healing was not about never hurting. It was about moving forward even with the scars. The true escape, he learned, was not just from the hands that held you down, but from the voice inside that told you to stay there. The root of pain, the one who hurts you, was once a victim too. It was a quiet afternoon when Tobias saw one of them again. A man from the old place. The one who used to strike the hardest. He was standing at the edge of the town, older, thinner, and not surrounded by others now. Tobias did not run. He stood still, heart beating fast, but feet rooted in the earth. The man looked up, met his gaze, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. There was no whip, no shouting, just silence, the kind that holds years of questions. Tobias had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was here, it did not feel like revenge. It felt like recognition. The man's eyes were not angry. They were tired, worn by something deeper than power or control. And Tobias, who had once trembled at the sound of his voice, saw something unexpected. Not strength, but fear. A man who had used violence to hide his own weakness. A person who had perhaps once been beaten down himself and learned to survive by becoming what had once hurt him. Tobias did not forgive him, not with words. Forgiveness was not a gift owed. But in that moment he understood, and in understanding something loosened, not to excuse the cruelty, but to stop carrying it. Because carrying pain does not heal it. Passing it on does not free you from it. Tobias turned and walked away. Not in fear, not in defeat, but in clarity. Some pain is passed like inheritance, buried in silence and repeated in action. But it only ends when someone sees it and refuses to become it. Tobias had been given the chance to become something else. Not perfect, not untouched, but aware. Aware of how easy it is to become what once wounded you and how powerful it is to choose not to. He looked up at the sky again, searching for wings above. This time he did not see the heron. He did not need to. The voice now lived within him. And as he stepped into the rest of his life, he carried more than survival. He carried the knowing. The pain stopped with him.